fun things.
Brass down
below.
Windows.
And so there's definitely a theme that's fun and playful, and it keeps it very light and motivating. But the challenging part, of course, is that the heart of Salesforce is a startup, and yet, we're now 45,000 people. So I always struggle with the fact that we don't have processes, and we haven't invested in technology for ourselves as much. And so when are we going to cross that chasm of becoming a big company, and when are we going to make that investment? So that's what's kind of looming.
So for me, actually, let me ask you this, maybe show me some hands. Who likes to go spend their day every day again and again with the same people and do the same thing again and again?
Somebody raise their hand.
So that's really what keeps me excited in sales, because every day is a new challenge. In sales, when you cross that finish line once, it's not over. The next race is already started. So if you like the dynamic nature, that's a great place. That's what I like, that's what I enjoy. Otherwise, you cannot survive in sales.
Data analysis. You launch a program, you measure it. If you don't know how to analyze that data and see what's going on and adjust, it will just die. So I love that part, because I'm very familiar with it. I like to work with it, all this data stuff, which is great. Challenging part, I'm going to throw some ball on this side. It's really sometimes tough to get aligned with sales. Sometimes, because let's just say 99%, 1% sometimes. Because you're not really invited at the table first. You have to really, put your effort, get close with the sellers on the sales. I understand. I mean, I put more than 30 years into this career. So everybody has quotas. Every month, every week they have meetings and what's going on. It's really tough thing to do. Who has the time to spend?
Of the trends that we are seeing, and in terms of also outsourcing, we are seeing even complicated engineering tasks being outsourced outside the Silicon Valley because it's darn expensive here, right? So it's hard to do engineering here. Then people would ask questions: why would I keep my sales or marketing teams in around Silicon Valley? And then the other one is automation. I'm a professor, so I have a hard time telling my students
are seriously in the how do we sell this thing? How do we get into mid-market, higher, enterprise? How do we make sure that once we have a small set of users, we then go full blast and try to sell this thing, and they can't get enough investment in it. So I think it's fine to say at the SMB level or the consumer product level, you don't need to sell. But the enterprise sales jobs are never going away, because to your point, it's the toughest job. It's a job of understanding what does this person really.
We keep the edge, and as a marketeer, if I take advantage of that edge, nobody in India, nobody in China knows this stuff yet. It will take 2 years maybe. They will get there, but I am 2 years ahead of them. So I'm not worried. Nobody's gonna get it. My job is not gonna get it. It can't be automated.
Salesforce is a great example, right? When I used Salesforce first time 18, 19 years ago, it was great product for that small organization. And at that time, they serviced SMB. Well, over time, learning how they can take over Siebel or Oracle, now basically they moved from the SMB space to the next level. But that didn't happen just because of R&D and engineering. It happened listening to what happened, what the customers are asking, what the customers needing. And same thing in the early stage of the business as well, in my perspective.
Yeah, I think if the cost of bringing product to market, either from a time or resources perspective, is relatively low, which is, it's a generalization, but it's true for a lot of the tech companies, and I think that risk improves significantly. Making the argument from the flip side, from a healthcare perspective, if you need to spend 10 years in the pipeline with clinical investments and such, I think the question becomes real for the company in terms of what's the true north. Is it the consumer need, customer need, or is it innovation for innovation's sake? Because there's enough examples out there where, again, and again, I don't want to create stereotypes. It's like the sales marketing stereotype, but R&D, they have a great idea. This is just a great product idea with no real customer need or insight. And there are still enough tech companies who can afford that, frankly, because again, the relative cost, incremental cost is relatively low to iterate on a platform. But in pharma or healthcare in general, you're talking about multi-million-dollar investments. That makes it make it or break it for the company for that year total, probably at the end of the day. So I see that convergence a lot more actually in healthcare. I think the real reason is, again, what is true north? Can you even afford to come out with a product that the consumer or the customer doesn't need? You really can't. So I think that's really the hard question for the company. Is what is true north? Is it really the customer need, or is it product as a king? Which again, I think Silicon Valley is still kind of going through that transformation, especially for the tech companies.
I think for us, marketing doesn't actually sit with sales. Marketing sits under, we have two CEOs. Marketing sits with product under one CEO, and sales sits with the other one under the other CEO. So in a way, we separated that. And marketing listens closely to customers and feeds that directly into the product teams. The way that we bridge the two is through what we call pipeline councils and pipeline excellence methodology. And that actually sits in what used to be my team, sales strategy. So it's a sort of unbiased team on the side that says, okay, do we have enough pipe? Is it the right quality? Is it the right quantity? Is it in the right quarter? And
idioms, they're just common talk. I mean, it's really important. And the same thing, I've worked here in the US and then also in Turkey. And it's key to be able to have something you can kind of talk to, just like small talk. And it's difficult when you're not able to do that, because then it immediately becomes a product conversation. And as a salesperson, I generally, when you start sentence two that way, it doesn't go well. So language, and learning about common kind of phrases and common like American events, baseball. So Turkish people don't know baseball. Americans love baseball. So you need to learn a little bit about baseball. It's like one example.
I think I mentioned it in one of the events we did before at Salesforce. So my dad's side of the family is Circassian, and we have a saying like, "Oh, sit like a Circassian girl." You don't speak. You're very polite. You're quiet. You're reserved, and you don't speak unless you're spoken to. Like that was the culture that I grew up in. But that's what they call a wallflower in the US. And if you're a wallflower in a meeting, you don't get invited to the second meeting because you're a wallflower and you just occupied space that wasn't worth it. So you have to learn when to say something. And I think you had the boştenike ses çıkarır. That was the other thing that our teachers kept saying at school. Oh, don't just speak for the sake of speaking. Here you have to speak for the sake of speaking. And every meeting you go to, you have to prepare and say, what's the topic? What is the one thing I absolutely want to say in this meeting? And when do I find the opportunity? If I can't say something else, that's the one thing I absolutely have to say. And make sure you hold yourself accountable to saying that. Otherwise, again, you won't get invited to the next meeting. You won't be respected. You'll be seen as a pushover. And especially at a company like Salesforce, where we hire a lot of type A people, you should see our meetings. It's not even an environment for introverts. It's just a complete, all these extroverts talking to one another and trying to get the last word in. It can be pretty daunting, but you sort of have to get used to that in the US. That's what's valued and rewarded, and so that is a challenge.
Two things. One, Hayal's example, it's a great advice. You need to know what the culture is about, right? We all need to know. I need to fan and all this. I didn't pay attention to American football. Who cares? The moment you're alone and you need to start dating and get out and go around and stuff, you need to know that stuff, because you're dating American people. So that's what they talk about. Same here, sales and marketing, and anything you do, right, you have to know. At least be aware of what's going on. The second is this. We're kind of, I think you talked about this. You say, I mean, we're pretty usually open people. We say what we think. Going back to Alcatel days. So we are in a meeting, Something didn't go wrong, I couldn't deliver. My boss is French, he's like, not making fun of French, but he was really tight. At the end, I'm like, yes, okay, I did it. I am the faulty one. I take this. I take the fault. I made a mistake. He's like, okay, we moved on. And then right after the meeting, her name was Munya Dukali, a colleague of mine, great friend afterwards. He said, Haluk, you never say you made a mistake here. Don't do it, because it will stick with you. And there are other ways to say what went wrong and why did it go wrong, and you can analyze it, you can talk to it, but never say, okay, it's mine, I take it, maybe it wasn't mine, but it's whatever, I did it. Don't do it, don't say it. I think it's a good advice. I'm not saying you should lie, but find ways to kind of explain what happened. Do the analysis. And
if I look at last 5 to 7 years, the IT executives, about 40+% non-English speakers. Keep that in mind too. The important aspect to me is the ability to enter, engage in a discussion. That could be anything. You need to be able to break the ice. You need to be able to, hey, it's not only the product you're selling, and it's not the only reason you are there. Well, maybe for you, that could be but you need to show the other side some empathy, engage, and whatever that may be. It may be sports, it may be...
And, make sure that you're on top of mind, speak up, and then, it just happened. And then I'm here working for Salesforce.
And let me add one thing, actually. I always had that vision, a fellow Turkish graduate, helping them, bringing them on board. Around the time I brought him on board, I talked to maybe 2, 3, I introduced you to some of them as well at that time. They were like, I cannot do, the first time, with that experience, you have to start somewhere. That somewhere was compiling data, and